Howdy, folks. I'm Brian.
I'm Amber.
And here's not Reddit. Today, when we went to the Am I the Jerk subreddit, we discovered this message.
It was actually later today because I went on here originally to pick stories, and I was able to pick stories fine. When we sat down to deliberate which ones we wanted, we got this message here.
Yeah. So basically, this subreddit's now gone private to protest recent admin actions. So Reddit hired an admin who apparently is a child predator. And we read about it. I mean, I guess, I don't know, if people want me to read about this tomorrow, if it's still happening, then I can read that tomorrow. But Amber and I decided that we would just have a conversation, I guess, and, so as not to kind of undermine this, because, it's important that if they've hired a child predator, that this person is, I think, fired and not moderating Reddit. I mean, I think that's important.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I mean, unfortunately, that means that we're not left with Reddit to read here, so you'll have to be entertained by our own devices here.
Yes.
Sorry, if you're here for Reddit, then you're not going to get it, but you will get us talking. So, what is a childhood story you have of being a jerk?
I'll tell you, I don't know if I'm really a jerk here, so we'll let you be the judge.
Okay.
When I was in middle school, I didn't like going to school.
Okay.
And my mom wouldn't really make me, but the school didn't like it that I wouldn't go to school. And so this happened to me twice. I skipped school enough that the police came to my house to bring me to school, and they drove me to school in the police car.
Yeah.
So that's a thing I did twice. So was I a jerk for skipping school and making the police come and bring me to school?
Well, I mean, little kids are going to do what little kids do.
I was in 7th grade.
Yeah, but that's still little kid territory.
That's true. I felt really old at the time. Because, when you're in middle school, you're like, yeah, I'm basically an adult now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think kids have rebellious stages, and I think kids have rebellious phases, and you were being a rebellious, teenager, probably close to teenager.
Yeah, I was probably
12, 13.
I would have been 12. My birthday was in May, so
almost teenager. And yeah, kids go through phases. Should you have involved the police to bring you? No, but I mean, that's kind of their job, right? Truancy officers and stuff like that, they bring kids to school because that's what their job is, right? So, I mean, yeah, you might have made a police officer's day a little tiny bit more inconvenient, but it's not like you're out, I'm sure they would much rather take a truant kid to school than a kid shoplifting or something like that, That's probably a much easier situation to deal with. All right, so I actually have a interesting jerk story here, I think, from my end of things. So I was actually a little brat when I was growing up, and the thing is, my sister has had this Timex watch, right? And I think I was just being funny. When I grew up, our parents had us living in a kind of an unfinished house type situation, all right? So there was visible insulation, right, on the wall. So they're right beside my bed was insulation, and yeah, so probably not necessarily the healthiest environment, but right beside my bed was some insulation. But basically, my sister, she had a watch, all right, and she got this watch for Christmas or her birthday or something like that. It was like a Timex watch. And I was just being a little brat, and I was just being funny at the time, and I hid her watch in the insulation. All right. Now, I was planning on giving it back to her, except for the fact that I forgot about it. And, like, a year later, When we were taking like the because we had only had this unit with the insulation as kind of a temporary household. We were taking like the insulation and stuff like that to move it to like an actual more permanent place. And we discovered Charity's watch in the wall, right? And she's like, "Oh, that's where we left. I guess it must have just fell in there, but it didn't fall in there. I actually hid it in there, like because I was a little brat, a little monster." And yeah, so I hid my sister's watch and forgot about it, and she didn't have it. So that kind of makes me a jerk, I think. What do you think, Ever?
Yeah. So I've liked horror since I was a kid. And I used to always try to scare my sister and our friends with horror stories. And they were kind of like the classic horror stories where a big one is that, there's something built atop an indigenous burial ground and everything goes wrong because of it. Well, I decided I was going to tell my sister and this friend, I told my sister and our friend that our house was built atop an old burial ground. And so they, of course, were a little bit incredulous because I was full of stories. And they decided they were going to dig in the yard. Because I told them that the tombstones were underneath the dirt. They just had to dig to find them. And so they decided they were going to dig. And so they started digging in our yard. And eventually they hit what I knew to be a cinder block. Like, it was very obvious to me that this was a cinder block. I don't know what it was doing underground, but there was a cinder block under there. And before they could get a good look at it, my dad comes out and he sees they've dug like this giant hole in our yard. And so he sees that and he's like, fill that in right now. And so for a little while, they were convinced that our house was built on top of a burial ground because a cinder block is, gray like a tombstone. So they were convinced.
Yeah. Well, speaking of digging, like this isn't so much of like me being a jerk as a kid, but so this is back when I was in 3rd grade, and there was a sand lot kind of thing in our school playground, right? And so we used to go out and play in the sand, and in the sand we would dig. And one day we dug, and we were building, like, I guess these sand forts. I don't know. But it turns out that we hit a time capsule. And in the time capsule was stuff that was buried for, I don't know, it must have been like for the year 2020 or year 2030. I don't know at the time. But yeah, we just stumbled upon this time capsule, and we had to ended up having to get reburied at some point in time. But it was kind of cool to look at the time capsule and see what was in it. So I'm curious. So the school I went to, the elementary school that I went to there, is actually decommissioned. It's now kind of I think the town hall of the town I grew up in. And this school actually was like one of those 1950s, like very, very temporary cement slab type schools that they constructed very quickly and to little expense. And it was supposed to have like a 20-year lifespan or something like that. And it lasted, all the way up until like 2000, I think it was, before they closed it. It was either, close to 2000 and close to the 2000s. And so this little tiny bunker of a school, they eventually realized that it was condemnable. I think there were like cracks in the foundation and stuff like that, and they're like, the safety inspector was like, you can't have this as a school anymore. It's actually dangerous for the kids because the roof might collapse on them. Yeah, so our school is condemned, right? So now no one's going to be around for when that time capsule is like due, right? So it's going to be up to like the residents of the town to remember that this time capsule is buried at the school for whomever. So I've wondered about that. It's like, who is going to unbury this? Will it get unburied? And like, are the records of where they reburied the time capsule at like somewhere? Because like they didn't rebury it in the same spot as they did before, or maybe they did, but it was just deeper. But I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, maybe the people who are supposed to unbury the time capsule think they know where it's at, and they're gonna be gaslighted by the school because someone reburied it somewhere where no one was expecting it.
That reminds me of, so my sister and some friends of ours, we decided we were going to bury a time capsule. And then like a few days, maybe not even the same day, like it ended up getting dug up. And eventually our friend Destiny confessed to it. And so we ended up reburying it, or I don't know if we reburied it or what. We tried to, but we had this little journal that went with the time capsule, and she had this very dramatic, "It was I who dug up the time capsule" thing in there. We tried doing time capsules a few different times, and then we ended up keeping one above ground. It's actually in my closet up there, that we open every 5 years. My school also did a time capsule when I was in 7th grade, because they built the new school. When I was in 3rd grade, we switched from, it was the John R. Graham School in VZ, and they built the VZ Community School, which I was really weirdly upset about. That we were, because I remember saying to my mom that I was not going to a community school. Like I've always had trouble with change, and so when I was a kid, it was the same way. And I did not want to go to school that wasn't named after someone. And I think it was just because I liked my old school and I didn't want to change schools. But I had but anyway, when I was in 7th grade, they decided they were going to build a time capsule for the school, to commemorate making the new school.
Yeah.
And we had to write these little passages for the time capsule. And I'm going to be 63 when this time capsule is opened. And if I actually go to the time capsule opening, my face is going to be and they read it, I'm just going to be beet red, because it was the most bizarre thing. My teacher laughed out loud when she read mine. It was weirdly bizarre. I don't remember it all, but we have this store called Hannaford here in Maine, and it used to be called Shop and Save. And when I was in 7th grade, they changed the name of the store from Shop and Save to Hannaford. Yeah. And I remember that I was upset about that, and so I made sure to call it Shop and Save in my little write-up thing. And I also had this weird made-up name I made up for myself. It was I don't know. I didn't like my name growing up. I like it now. It's a pretty cool name, but I just thought that girly names were really stupid, because I was one of those not like the other girls. And so I gave myself this really weird name. I think it had a bunch of stereotypically masculine names and this weird last name. I don't even remember, but it was just bizarre. And
that sounds a little weird.
It was weird.
My made up name is Fangle Doppel Rapple Wobble.
I'm surprised you still remember that. But with our time capsule, I was also convinced I was going to be really famous. I don't know if I wrote about that in my letter or not, but I was I'm kind of hoping I do something with my life before we open the time capsule, so I don't fail to live up to whatever weird expectations I had when I was in 7th grade.
I don't even remember what weird expectations I had for myself in 7th grade. And I think it's perfectly fine to not live up to 7th grade Amber's expectations, or whatever your name was that you were calling yourself at the time.
Yeah, I don't even remember. Well, I don't even have the vaguest idea what that name is. I think Jacob was in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe Andrew, because I had friends with those names, and so I just take random people's names. Their names are cooler than mine.
I am Andrew Jacob Watson the Third.
Yeah, so I don't actually remember very well. I have this very vague, and I feel that secondhand embarrassment if I even think of this time capsule story.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's secondhand embarrassment for when you're a little kid. You're not the same person as you were then, and it's kind of one of those things where you're oh yeah, whatever I did then, this was a different person essentially with different motivations and everything like that. And it's just, that's the point of growth. You aren't your 7th grade person anymore.
Yeah, well, I just feel probably all the other kids in my class were writing normal stuff about this is what our lives are like. And I'm I don't even
Shop
remember.
and save must survive forever.
Yes, we have Shop and Save. I think I also mentioned Circuit City, which then went out of business not too long after.
F's in chat for Circuit City.
That used to be my favorite store when I was a kid.
Yeah, we liked Best Buy. We were Best Buy people.
I was not. I was Circuit City all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I eventually had to switch over to Best Buy when Circuit City went out. But
Yeah.
until then, I was a diehard Circuit City fan.
I always liked Radio Shack. You probably didn't go to Radio Shack much.
No.
And Radio Shack had electronic components, and I was always into electronics when I was a kid. And I wasn't very good at designing electronic circuits, but I did design a couple here and there. But because Radio Shack has all these components, you can go there and buy them, out of the bin. But their stock and that kind of stuff kept declining until eventually, they weren't really the electronic component company at a certain point. They were mostly just like, here's some cheap junk you can buy. So,
What was your favorite store as a kid? Was it Radio Shack or did you have a different one?
as a kid, probably Best Buy was my favorite store. And the reason why Best Buy was my favorite store is because it had a lot of computers and computer stuff.
For me, it was the music and the movies. That's why I liked Circuit City, was music and movies.
All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, consider giving me a like. If you didn't, consider giving me a dislike. Also, tell me if you wanted me to read this tomorrow. I'll see what we can do. Maybe Reddit will be back online tomorrow. If not, then I'll be planning on something else. So, yeah. So thanks again to Amber for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you all tomorrow.